In December 2022, an F-35B Lightning II was filmed crashing while doing a vertical landing at Fort Worth, Texas. Before losing power, smoke can be seen coming out of the engine, which is unusual. Then power abruptly cut, bringing down the aircraft. Though landing on the gear, differential thrust caused the tail to lift and the nose to drop, which snapped off their front gear. The pilot managed to wrestle the aircraft back upright for a safe ejection. I suspect what happened is the engine was experiencing a problem, leading to a momentary drop in thrust. Because the aircraft landed hard, it's possible the drive shaft from the engine to the lift fan disconnected, causing the differential thrust when the engine seemed to have recovered. On December 27th, the Joint Program Office issued a cease of delivery of F-135 engines, and 2 days later issued a directive to ground a small number of aircraft. This circumstantial timing seems to support my theory, but time will tell. Hopefully a public report will be released that details the incident. In the meantime, a number of people seem to get a negative impression about the aircraft because of the fact that it receives a disproportional amount of negative coverage in the news outlet. So that brings forward the question, just how safe is the F-35 Lightning II? Integrating a new aircraft. The F-35 has been entering service since 2016. Anytime we introduce a new aircraft, the complexity of the system means that significant effort must be made to integrate the aircraft into not only the inventory, but also the logistical train and overarching doctrine of armed forces. The aircraft will not be a one-to-one replacement in capability for the aircraft it intends to replace. It is designed to conduct operations in a fundamentally different way than fourth-generation aircraft. This means that new tactics and standard operating procedures must be developed in order to maximize efficiency and effectiveness of the aircraft. For example, it has a ferry range of about 1,600 nautical miles. That is considerably less than the F-16 in ferry configuration. However, it likely would not be flying high-low-high attack profiles against the enemy. Instead of flying profiles that use most of its fuel routing around threats, which is called the routing factor, it would instead be flying relatively high and much closer to threats. This means that in combat, despite range being considerably worse on paper, it significantly outranges its fourth-generation contemporaries. Because it also leverages new technology such as stealth, it requires parts and expertise not required for fourth-generation aircraft. These are examples of the learning curve involved. It is ill-advisable to introduce a new combat aircraft as a drag-and-drop replacement for legacy capability. As a result, a knowledge base is assembled via developing theories and testing them in operation. For this reason, every new combat aircraft introduced will have significantly higher incident rates until that knowledge base is assembled. This is true for all aircraft, including fan favorites such as the F-15, F-18, and F-16, which were all criticized when they first entered service as being unsafe, overly expensive, and unreliable. Looking at the number of aircraft incidents and comparing them to each other, we see that the F-35 actually fares the best amongst them. The irony in having a single engine is that since maintenance practice in the United States forces are so good, that having one less engine cuts down on the chance to make mistakes. The manufacturing and operating tolerances of the engines also means that if one fails, the vast majority of the time, it means it will destroy the other engine installed on the aircraft. For this reason, the F-16 tends to have fewer Class A mishaps than the F-15. We see the same trend with the F-35 and F-22. We see the F-16 start with a high mishap rate in the 1980s. Though there are ups and downs, we can also observe a fall in mishap rates over time, though there is a trouble period post-2010. For the F-15, we see a very similar downward trend over time, though its Class A mishap rate seems to remain higher over time. For the F-22, this trend is broken, as Class A mishaps have increased over time, while aircraft attrition is far less than both the F-16 and F-15 at the same point in their careers, having only lost 5 aircraft from 2005 to 2020. The F-35 continues this trend of the F-22, having entered service in earnest in 2016. The Class A mishap rate and the destruction rate promptly increased. Like the Raptor, we're talking single digits, like 1 or 2. Those destruction and Class A mishap rates really illustrate that the F-22 and F-35 are exceptionally safe aircraft. As mentioned before, this is also during a time where armed forces are increasingly chaotic in funding allocation, as well as experiencing nearly unprecedented operational tempo, or OPTEMPs. From 2001 until 2021, the armed forces have been conducting operations in multiple theaters, including Iraq, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Japan, Britain, Germany, Australia, the Philippines, and South Korea, as well as domestic operations including training, national airspace policing, and home defense intercepts. Unsustainable OPTEMP. As mentioned, the F-22s and F-35 safety records are even more exceptional because of the increasing OPTEMP that armed forces have been experiencing since the turn of the millennium, an OPTEMP that is not sustainable. While the overall safety in armed forces aviation endeavors have increased with time, the exception is from 2010 to 2020, where the number of incidents had been increasing. The OPTEMP has been increasing year over year, leading to burnout of experienced pilots and maintainers who leave before passing on that expertise. A KC-10 unit reports that pilots are only getting 2 weekends a month to relax. That comes out to about 4 days a month. This is exacerbated by the inconsistent funding from Congress, meaning that pilots and maintenance crews are often ran at max capacity while funding exists, only to then significantly ramp down operations for the remainder of the year. This stop-start funding means that routines can never come into existence. Without routines, efficiency cannot be achieved at a reasonable rate. Pilots and maintainer skills perish with time, meaning that once funding is restored, they are trying and failing to play catch-up. Inconsistent training also happens to be a theme throughout the armed forces as well. Pilots are often training to become extremely competent at flying their aircraft, only to then be pulled from the flight line to do desk duties. By the time they return to flying, their skills have perished. Army transport crews are in a similar situation, where some units are reporting about 15 days in between flights due to pilots fulfilling administrative duties, since administration is understaffed by the DoD. For maintainers, it's not much better. They are often rotated between aircraft, meaning they lose the opportunity to gain efficiency in maintaining an aircraft type. Despite a huge amount of overlap between aircraft maintenance needs, aircraft have quirks and idiosyncrasies that maintainers have to learn. Marine maintainers often have to leave the flight line to perform duties such as drill instruction or recruitment in order to qualify for a promotion. Others are often tasked with gate guarding, amongst other menial duties that leave them distracted from their jobs. With inconsistent funding, training, and OPTEMP, this also proves problematic for an aging logistical system. The logistical system maintainers rely on doesn't even have the ability to track orders like we can if we order from Amazon, for example. This means parts often go missing, or it's impossible to know when they'll arrive, ruining planning. Speaking of planning, the inconsistent funding also means that rationing resources is impossible, because you'll never know what the rationing period is. It could be for a few months, it could be all year. For this reason, Marine units have been observed reusing $5 disposable filters on F-18 Hornets. All of this has led to frustration and burnout, causing a low retention rate. Experienced maintainers and pilots are leaving, taking that expertise with them. New recruits are being rushed in to fulfill their place with significantly less training. Pilot flying hours are often lower than the contemporaries they're replacing had at the same point in their career. More and more training is being done with simulators, which isn't inherently bad, but it's not being followed up with real-world experience. An incident with a recruit removing a panel from an aircraft resulted in them dropping the panel on their foot because they had no clue how heavy it would be. In the simulation, you simply click the panel and it disappears. This also means many recruits don't even know what tools they need to conduct a fix in the first place. Pilots aren't faring much better, often receiving fewer and fewer flying hours, but simulator hours are also down. There's also the issue where simulators are often not being maintained or are inadequate. This is especially true for legacy aircraft like the F-15 or F-16. On a side note, I really think that's why Eagle Dynamics just announced the Globe for DCS, because they see an opportunity to pick up more military contracts. Anyways, many pilots report long breaks into training. Some are taking a year to complete a 27-week course. Many pilots are also being rushed through obtaining certifications they're frankly not qualified for. The reason for this is positions need to be filled due to the high turnover caused by burnout. Due to inadequate and rushed training, units are often finding themselves in a debt of competence. Recruits report to units needing to be trained. Because the unit is training and can expect to find itself in high OPTEMP situations, this means that overall competence in the armed forces is decreasing with time. The increasing number of waivers also seems to support this theory. Armed Forces safety efforts. While there are major problems, it's not as if the armed forces don't put effort and resources into aviation safety. Since 2014, F-16s have been obtaining GCAS, or ground collision avoidance systems. This specialized software prevents controlled flight, or flight where the aircraft is perfectly fine and fully controllable, collisions into the ground. Since then, 10 F-16Cs were saved from ground collisions. Another win for the armed forces was during the sudden onslaught of physiological episodes experienced by pilots from 2012 to 2018. Joint efforts between the Air Force, Navy, and Marines managed to find the root causes such as dehydration, mental exhaustion, and pilot physical condition. The Joint Task Force was assembled in one singular building full of labs, allowing for fast and organic collaboration between the armed forces. The result is a new focus on data collection on the pilots. understanding of physiological conditions, how to better deal with the stress of operating combat aircraft, and improved cleaning procedures on life support equipment. You can see some of that effort in Hazard Lee's video where he showcases the rapid procurement efforts for pilot monitoring hardware. Room for improvement. The result of these efforts have been a reduction of Class A mishaps in 2020, finally reversing the trend of deteriorating military aviation safety. This is a good thing, but it can be made better. During the 1990s, civilian commercial aviation was seeing a similar stagnation in mishap rates. However, the mishap rate stagnation was during a time of massively increasing commercial market, so even though accidents per 100,000 hours weren't increasing, the increasing volume of traffic meant that every few days would encounter a disaster. In response to this, Congress created the National Civil Aviation Commission, while the White House created the Commission on Aviation Safety and Security. Both commissions created a joint venture called the Commercial Aviation Safety Team. Through standardizing and increasing data collection about commercial aviation, they were able to reduce accident rates by 83% in the span of 10 years. The Department of Defense already has a standardization of data collection as established by DoD-I 6055.19. These data collection standards include the Military Flight Operations Quality Assurance, or MFOQA, the Aviation Safety Action Program, or ASAP, and the Simulator Operations Quality Assurance Standard, or SOQA. However, these have not been implemented in practice. The armed forces all continue to utilize their own standards, which means data is often difficult to compare and analyze. Moving forward, standardization of data collection, better analyzation of said data, building a more robust logistical system, and better pacing of operations and funding needs to be prioritized. That said, recognition needs to be given for the safety being as good as it is, considering all the problems being experienced right now. With the introduction of the B-21 Raider, this too will help tremendously as it will consolidate the logistical pipelines of the B-2 and the B-1. Quality of training also has the potential to increase with the introduction of the T-6B and the T-7, offering low-cost but competent units for pilots to train with. That said, it's going to take the next few years to reverse these trends, and it'll be the better part of 2 decades to truly recover. Thank you for watching. This channel seeks to take complex aviation topics and make them more approachable for the average viewer. The goal is to reduce confusion and misconceptions in order to increase understanding and enthusiasm of aviation. If you enjoy this content, please subscribe for more. In the meantime, enjoy your dance with the angels.